we're starting, but just give it a minute, wait for somebody to come on. There we go. Got a few viewers. Coming a little early because we were here early, so.
All set?
All set.
All right. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Getting back to inspection 2020, we've completed the Grand Nationals, the Legends, Street Stocks. We're going to do a combination inspection today, or description of what we do. Mods and sport mods. We'll try and highlight the differences and go through those. First thing, got a beautiful race car here today to be looking at. This car piloted by Ed LeMay. For those of you that are really up on your Beaver Dam history, Ed LeMay, first winner of the Henkel Memorial, always one of the stout competitors out at Beaver Dam, and we're blessed to be able to use his car today for inspections. When we get into doing an inspection, those inspection check sheets are available online. Chris has been kind enough to post them out there, so you can print that out. This happens to be the mod inspection. Sport mod is out there as well. So guys, you can go through, you can look at them and see exactly what we're going to be looking at for that. First thing we do is when we go into inspection, and just like at the racetrack, you'll have to deal with a little bit of traffic noise once in a while.
Jerry, there's been a few belated birthday wishes, so just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I just continue to get age gracefully, I hope.
Okay.
First thing we get when we look at inspection in the cockpit is look at the seat. We like to see this great full containment seat, securely mounted. You can see the fender washers down here, the grade 5 or better bolts, nicely done. Shoulder harnesses up to date, properly mounted. These honestly look brand new. Brand new, Don? Yeah, nods all around. You know, in the grand scheme of things, safety equipment is really cheap when you consider the health and welfare of your driver, so it's well worth it. You also look, you see the roll cage padding on the back side here, and then you can feel this. If you want to flip your camera around and shine it back this way, Chris, there you go. That's the high density padding that also doesn't burn. You also can see the diagonal in the top of the roll cage right up here. That's another item that we do look for in that safety inspection. Making sure that's intact. Proper window net. Now this one runs down through the body, but once inside it's actually secured to the chassis. Don's nodding profusely over there because he knows we've made some guys actually prove that to us on occasion, and I know his integrity will make sure that that's properly mounted. Don't just rivet it and pinch it in the body, because that will fail. The other thing, when you're doing your net, you want to make sure no tears, no abrasions. Window nets are cheap. When you consider what they're going to provide as far as the level of protection between rocks, debris, what have you, make sure it's there. On that same note, rocks, debris, you can see a proper rock screen here. Nice heavy gauge. This one happens to be 1/2 inch tubular. It's perfect. You can also put screen on here if you're really necessary. However, I know some of the guys get concerned about the screen clogging with wet, heavy clay. But it is required you have the 3 bars minimum in there. Chris, if you want to come around, when you look at the steering wheel, one of the things we look at on the steering wheel is on the cowl. The steering wheel, the cowl cannot come any further back than the back of the steering wheel. Don knows this rule intently. That also helps with the driver getting in and out. On that same note, 12-inch minimum window opening. You can see this one. He's got almost 14 there. You know, especially for you bigger guys, make sure you can get in and out with your helmet and gloves on. In a panic situation, you need to be able to get out without pulling that helmet. You need that extra room. It's definitely well worth it. On a side note, ideally you need 12 inches going the other way too. Now, this car has a flat deck over here, so he has that as well. So he's able to escape either direction if he needs to. Chris, you probably want to switch positions with me now. Shining down in here, looking at this area, full floor, properly done. The pedals in there, no sharp edges. Those are the things we're looking for. He's got this nicely plated off here in the door area. One of the things we do periodically look at when we see new cars, and most of the cars we're seeing now are purpose-built. Those cars are of a decent quality, but we do from time to time bust out our sonic tester, which will ultrasonically check the thickness of the tubing. That is critical. And we'll check the roll cages, especially if it's somebody we don't know. This happens to be Pro Chassis by Uherka.
Oh, jeez.
That wasn't that. But absolutely, we know what we're getting there. So once we go then, we finish the interior chassis. We start stepping back and looking around at the body. The doors, there's a full plethora of measurements, and Don and I were talking before this in the green room about roof pitch and angle, deck pitch and angle, how much you're allowed. We've got some new equipment to be able to test that fast and efficiently. But door heights, ground clearance, skirts, all those dimensions are in the rule book. On the rear deck, flat rear deck, everything's secured. By the way, a little advertising here. Taillight panel is required. That's this taillight panel. You can leave the signage up there. I don't have a problem with that. But the taillight panel is required, as well as the full bumper. And we'll come back to that. When we come around down the right side, just noting the bodywork cannot extend beyond the rear bumper. Again, your flat interior deck. Ribs on the roof, you are allowed. This complies with the rule, the maximum height of that rib. There is a max and minimum roof length that is measured in the center. You can roll this front edge. A little bit of aero stuff there. There are some rules as far as the amount of curve that you're allowed to have in here. And if you were to draw a straight line, that if this is within that spec. Don knows those rules quite intently. We get over here to the roof, we start coming around to the front, to the hood and the nose. Don, you want to pull that rear deck for me? The hood must go frame rail to frame rail, back to the engine block, cover that. When you get to the nose, same thing with the nose, it has to go no more than, I believe the spec is 2 inches outside the frame rail. There is a minimum height that you need to maintain. This is compliant. Also, you look at the front bumper. There's a spec as far as the spread of those bumper tubes, the distance in between this area, as well as that height. And that is to make sure there's no single bar front bumpers, none of the little cheesy narrow bumpers. But also we look at bumper mounts. You can see here some nice heavy 1/2 inch bolts. That is the requirement. You can't be putting it on with 1/4 inch pins. It's not going to make the spec. At that point, we've completed the body portion of the inspection, the walk around. We go in the back here.
Got quite a few viewers, so if anybody has any questions about any of this, go ahead and ask.
Fire them up. We'll do our best to handle it. First thing we look at back here, we're not so much concerned with the suspension on an A-mod because they're given a great deal of latitude with that rear suspension. I'll touch on the sport mods in a moment here. Fuel cell properly mounted, secure, properly vented, all the lines secured. That is super important. Don's got a great system here. When we look underneath here, you can see the shock absorbers. This will be a point of contention. That happens to be a legal shock. 01 Shock Service providing these. When you get into the sport mods, that changes slightly. You can also see here he's got his drop chain right here, all within spec. Now, on a sport mod car, you're only allowed one of 3 different rear suspension configurations. The sport mod is allowed a conventional 4-link stock GM, which we rarely see. Leaf spring car, there are a few of those floating around, or the 3-link car. 3-link car tends to be the most common. 3-link car, there's some minimum specs as far as the canard bar length and the rod lengths, and we will periodically check those from time to time. As part of that, we don't get too crazy about it in pre-tech, but just be aware that a post-race inspection, that will definitely be something we'll be looking at. I'm going to pull up a little bit of Don signage here because we want to address the rear bumper.
Jim Tremblay just commented, for mod, let us know if they run alcohol so we can get them the proper stickers for the safety team.
Yep. With the rear bumper cannot extend more than 4 inches beyond the frame rail. It needs to be capped. If it goes beyond the 4-inch dimension, they need to loop and return. The fuel cell protection must go below the level of the fuel cell. On that note, if your fuel cell protection is integral into your bumper and you damage or lose that lower portion, you will not be allowed to return to the track. So just be aware of that. Most of the guys full well are. Honestly, if you get hammered that bad that you lose a bumper, we probably have bigger issues to be concerned with. But having fuel cell protection is one of the things that's key to keeping this class safe. We'll go back around up front. Once we go up front, now we get under the hood. Again, some of the differences, and let me back up. One thing I didn't touch on with the 3-link sport mod, nothing can be rubber mounted on the sport mod. Everything has to be rigid, whereas in your A mod, they're allowed to get rather creative. Don's nodding his head profusely back there and grinning, but you can be rather creative with that rear suspension and innovative on the A mod. The sport mod, though, everything needs to be solid mounted. We have caught some of those items. Again, that's a post-race, not a pre-race situation. When we go under the hood, really we're looking for some basics on the A mod. Steel drive shaft, there is a minimum spec as far as the diameter, and we've got a gauge that loops over that. The correct transmission configuration. We also get in looking at the carburetor linkage, carburetor spacer, and the number of springs on there. You can see he's actually got above the minimum. The minimum is 2. I actually see 3. So he's well within that. He understands that. And it is a rigid linkage. Radiator securely mounted. One of the other things you get to look at is your overflow. And he'll run this one and bury it in the frame rail. Again, car's just not quite completed, pretty close. We got a couple of things to do, but that'll typically run into a bottle or an overflow, or down in the frame rail. It needs to be contained. Mufflers, this one's got inserts. I've reached in there before. He's got shell inserts. We don't get too crazy about that. You need some type of muffling device. You need to be compliant with the racetrack rules. Bottom line, how we're going to judge that. If your car's excessively loud, you're going to be given an opportunity to fix it. And if you don't quiet it down, you have to load it up and take it home and fix it there. But smart player is get those inserts. They're not horribly expensive. When you're looking at the front frame section, the frame section needs to be complete. while we're up on this side, Chris, one thing to point out, and I know you've gotten a number of calls for them, and I'm going to point at it with, if you want to look, that is the new location of the transponders at the rear of the mid-plate for the A-Mod and Sport Mod division. So competitors are reminded, move those transponders up to the rear of that mid-plate. That's the ideal location. So you're properly scored. If you keep it in the back, it'll still pick up on the loop, but you're giving up an honest 8 feet. And in a close event, doom on you that if our manual scoring doesn't pick it up, you're going to be scored off the transponder, and that will be to your disadvantage. Looking at your front suspension here, stock rotors, stock calipers, stock lowers, aftermarket uppers, all permitted. Again, your 01 steel shocks, so you're good with that. An OEM style steering box, mounted in the correct location, all within the confines of the rules. We don't get too crazy about that. There are some post-race things we get into a little bit as far as going further. With the Sport Mod, once we pull the hood on a Sport Mod, we're looking at a couple different things. Sport Mod has some different engine configurations. As well, this happens to be an open motor. In the A-Mod, you could be running a 604 GM crate. Then we'll be looking for the appropriate seals. We do have the holographic check where we can coordinate the seal to the ID of the block. And that same thing would apply to the 602 when you go into the Sport Mod. So competitors that may be tempted to alter those configurations, just be aware the racetracks are working with GM on getting that data out there, and the seal's got to match the ID on the blocks. On the Sport Mod, a 9 to 1 on the built motor, and then you're looking at the 2-barrel carburetor. We'll take a quick look at the tires on pre-inspection. We don't get real uptight on the tires. Again, pre-tech, post-race tech is when we're going to get a little bit more serious about looking at that. You can see G60 Hoosier, that's what everybody's required to run on. And you can see these are used, they've been psyched. The other thing, Don's got these on for an open show. He's just a grinning over there because we talked about that pre-show or pre-inspection. But once you get to competition racing, you got to be compliant. But to his credit, he does have the covers are screw-on, which are required through all the insurance requirements we're having to do. That pretty much wraps up the car inspection portion on the Avon Sport Mod. The other stuff would be the driver's personal gear. We kind of touched on some of that at an earlier session. Those things all apply for this: helmet, gloves, shoes, making sure that that equipment's all up to date, current, in good shape. So be prepared when you come into tech. You're going to want to be looking at that stuff. Again, I return back to these sheets, and Chris, you've got those all out there. If you're concerned about it, you can check your sheets, or by all means reach out to me, Chris, Jim Tremblay, Dave Casper. They're watching us with COVID-19 stuff. They're sheltering in place, so to speak, but hopefully we can see every one of you out at the racetrack. Chris, you and I talked. Hopefully we can get some updates as far as when racing's going to be starting to pick up. We are starting to do some private practice sessions out at the racetrack, and we look forward to getting those. If you have questions about setting that up,
You need to call the track. There are so many details that go into it.
correct.
A lot of people have been messaging the Facebook page, and I would love to give you the details, but I don't have them. So, and just know that Carolyn got about 50 phone calls in the first day, so leave a message. She will get back to you.
Yep, she is working on it. I know with some of you off work at this time, they're trying to work some opportunities other than just Saturdays and Sundays. That we do have to operate under the confines of our conditional use agreement. but I know there's some stuff during the week that we will be opening up 2 private practice sessions. Again, I stress, call Carolyn. She will give you those details, go over what the do's and don'ts of that are. I know I've talked to her about making myself available out to help do a little prep so you're not practicing on a burnt out racetrack, but something respectful of what you would run to on a Saturday night. Chris, I don't think we missed any huge gafers. Anything on your Facebook messages?
Jim says, don't forget all weights should be painted white with the car number on them.
Yep, we didn't see on this one yet. I'm sure Don hasn't scaled it. The other thing we do look for in the back is making sure the positive battery terminals are covered. Usually they're tucked up underneath there. We do watch for that as well. That's on the check sheets. Any other ones?
Wow. No other questions. One thing I noticed is if you guys see this wonderful number on the side, with the thick outside, it has the black and then the orange and then the gray. From seeing from the tower, if you're going to get fancy with colors and stuff, if you have a solid, bright color like this, that makes it a lot easier to see from the tower. So I know it's highlighted in the rule books, no holographic stuff, but I know there's all the fancy stuff going on with wraps and such. So as long as you have a bright, solid color around it, I'm not going to say it has to be replaced.
Something like this, easily seen, highly recognizable, great from the fan standpoint. Honestly, stuff like this is great for your sponsors as well. While the small lettering looks cool as heck when it's sitting here in the driveway, and for static pictures, you got to remember you're going 70 miles an hour with a bunch of dirt getting thrown at it. You know, what are those race fans going to see? That's what they're going to remember. And also, it is a struggle. I've been up in the scoring tower. They kicked me out. That's a whole nother story. But you definitely want to make them easy to read. Before we exit out, I got to thank Don letting us borrow his race car and pick on him for a bit. But he does a great job. He's one of the premier builders in this division. He's been doing it a long time, and really got to say thank you for letting us burn up your Sunday afternoon.
No problem.
With that, any questions, don't hesitate. Reach out to Chris. She'll forward them to me. I'm not much a big Facebook guy, but get it to me or any one of our staff. I'll be glad to try and get you those answers, and hopefully we'll get you some updates shortly as far as what's happening out at the racetrack and when we can see everybody out there together. Thanks again for tuning in.
Bye, everybody.